Good morning and welcome. Glad to see you all and glad to be with you all as we kick off registration. And feel free at any time to get coffee and donuts, and really just excited to enter into a discussion with you all this morning. My name is Will Norton, and I'm the Dean of the high school, so I work with a lot of the outside the classroom programs. And this is Caroline Scholler, who's our Director of Counseling, who does a wonderful job with that group. And we are delighted to embark upon this discussion with you. It's one that's been ongoing this summer. It started with a presentation that Caroline and I did at the International Boys School Conference in Baltimore to faculty members across the globe. And then continued last week with the teachers at Faculty in Service, and very much so has been something that we have done as a way to say, this is not something that anybody pretends to have the full right answer, but it's the things that we want to be discussing and want input, and mostly just want to be on the same page in regards to raising young men. And if you think of the young men as kind of being within the storm and anchors to help them, to ground them in the midst of that, of course the parent relationship is the strongest. We feel privileged to have a piece of that, especially during the 7th through 12th grades as they come through. Of course, there are other anchors, such as their faith and such as positive peer influences and things like that. And so it's good to think about ways in which the young men are influenced and ways that they are being anchored. And so in regards to the storm, I gave you 2 slides that you can digest on your own. That was covered in the Atlantic last week. You may have seen it, and if you read it, you'd be well equipped with the statistics on why our work and why paying attention to these things are really important. And so you can look at that on your own. I'm not going to go through it, but basically the trend is that adolescents are more isolated, more personally dysfunctional, and less independent than generations past. And he blames the iPhone, and it's certainly an interesting trend that we're all watching that kind of shows you in a way what we're up against. And so I'll give that as kind of an understanding of what the storm looks like, and meaning what is our culture and what are they exposed to, and how might there be things that would pull them away from the anchors that we may push them towards. So given that, our Student Affairs Committee, which includes Fran in the junior school and the deans of students and several people from the counseling office, and we meet every week and we talk about just various issues and what things can we do better. And then the product of that is that the Social Awareness Day tomorrow that your boys are going to go through is we develop those programs and what are the most pertinent topics and how could we try to communicate this in the best way. And so last year we brainstormed what we're going to talk about today, and we developed this graphic and we're going to talk about each aspect of the graphic, but basically you begin with your goals. What are the social goals that we want by the end of the time of their journey through MBA? What are the developmental trends? What are the things that they are going through personally, and what are they going to be exposed to, and what does that journey look like? And then what are the best practices to achieve those goals given those developmental trends? And so that's kind of what we're going to talk through today. So I'm going to start with the goals, and by the way, so we're going to run through this, and then at the end, so if you have a thought or you have something you want to add, we're just going to wait for that to the end, and so please keep that, and we would love that feedback at the end. So in regards to the goals, the first one is functional independence. And this is closely tied and connected with grit. And from the transition from high school where young men prepare themselves to be able to function independent from their parents when they go to college. And the transition to college brings an academic and behavioral independence that is very new, and where more or less they're on their own. Aside from transcripts, that's all that you're pretty much going to see from their college. That's going to be a lot of your oversight in regards to their academics in college. And certainly behaviorally, there are no more curfews. They are on their own as far as doing what they would like with their time and when they do it, and things of that nature. And of course, the next major step is financial independence, which comes or traditionally after college, but as you'll see from the statistics that were listed, that is a trend that is less and less common in people transitioning after college. A lot of people are moving back home after college, and so these transitions will obviously vary by student, will vary by family, with different approaches, but regardless, I think we can all agree that the journey through high school is an important step towards the independence, and also an important step in regards to whether the student has the grit or ability to be independent at the next level. And so this goal elicits the question of, in what ways are we helping the young men to become self-sufficient? And additionally, how can the school and parents partner effectively in that journey? And so we'll talk about this goal a little bit when we get to the developmental trends, but just wanted to introduce that. Positive and benevolent leadership is the next goal. And as you may have noticed, a lot of our yearly themes center upon ways that we can build boys into positive and benevolent leaders who make a difference in society. A lot of our service programs are geared towards that. And it's a topic that I'm sure you would agree that manifests itself through starting with the small things, the small character things in high school, and then hopefully snowballs into a life of benevolence and leadership where they seek to make a difference and make a positive impact. And so our roles in developing this is very much open-ended, and that can be very abstract, but in the best practices piece, I'll touch on some key aspects that help to promote this goal. The third goal is authenticity and transparency. And some of you may know from who were here last year, the documentary, The Mask You Live In, that we showed for the 8th through 12th grade. Was an interesting one that was part of the social awareness program last year. And the statistics that it shows and the statistics of teens are pretty staggering, from the suicide statistics to pornography statistics. And one of our takeaways from this documentary and our observations of various student issues is that a student's ability to be transparent correlates very closely with his ability to push through dark times. And so this idea of whether you have a kind of an honest humility about your shortcomings. And what I mean by that is that a student has more grit if he's willing to be transparent and reach out during the hard times. And as a result, we've kind of adopted this as one of the aspirations in regards to character goals for the young men at MBA, and we would hope that they would be authentic and transparent young men who are just aware of both their strengths and their weaknesses all at once, and not afraid to be able to discuss in a healthy way either one of those. And this aspiration was highlighted by MBA alumnus and Cy Young award-winning pitcher who's now with the Atlanta Braves, R.A. Dickey, who spoke at the January IBSC conference that we hosted here with a few people. And I've got a clip from that I wanted to show that I think will highlight that.
noble, because there's more to character than just the outward appearance. And while a young man may try to achieve like good things with good intention, of a noble intention, and have a lot of good values, if there's not something behind it, he ends up just being an empty shell when he gets into about midlife. And as a professional counselor, I work mostly with professional men, and it's sad to me, and I was one of them, of how a man who really wants to do well can get a couple of kids and a marriage and a couple of kids into life and really not have anything to give the people he loves the most.
I think I was really good because of my experience. I'd become really good at manipulating. I think that was one of the things that was tough. I could fake character. Well, I mean, you can't really fake character, but I could make you see a picture of me that was something that I really wasn't, and I was really good at it. And I think that was what was hard for me, was to leave that, like, first admit that that's who I was. That was really tough. This is what I'm a faker. Like, I may be a good athlete, I may be an MLB baseball player, first round draft pick, Olympian, whatever. I may be that, but I'm a fake. And it's really hard, and I'll just be vulnerable with you because that's really the only way I know to be now. It's really hard to admit that you tricked your wife into marrying a man who wasn't honest and wasn't real and wasn't authentic. She married a version of me that wasn't at all true, because I was so good at convincing people that I was something that I really wasn't, because I was in such pain. Like, I did not want you anywhere near my story, right? Because I felt so alone in it. I felt so hurt, so angry. Like, when I arrived on campus here at MBA, I was frightened. You would have never known it. Because the way that would manifest was, like, if you looked at me wrong, I was going to knock your block off. Like, that was part of my stuff. And so that and
the tough guy.
Yeah, that in the schoolyard commands respect, sure, right? And I was a good athlete, but that wasn't really who I was. I yearned for somebody to know my story.
But if a person does not have authenticity, they may aspire towards something of great stature, but they really will be a fraud if they get there. And so we talk about character, we've got to really be thinking about the inside out, not just the outward effects. So if you need to understand the territory and the terrain of your own heart, your own story, the vows you made in your life that have shut you down and closed you off from being fully known. And so the less you're known, really the less you have to offer other people. And not to mention all the things I was doing outside of myself to kind of keep the facade going. All the medications I was, the extracurricular things that I was doing to kind of manage my heart. And so whether you come from a good home, like I came from, or you came from, a really, really rough upbringing, the human story is exactly the same.
And that was Stephen James, who's the director of Sage Hill Counseling, who helped RA along his journey. And so one of the questions that comes from that is, in what ways is our community one that encourages a facade or one that encourages humility? And we're going to talk about this under the social development of young men, but it's a student's ability to be open about his shortcomings and to understand what they are and ask help when it's needed, and to be able to communicate those to other people, that is closely tied with his ability to overcome hurdles in life. And so we'll talk about that a little bit more. The next goal is establish virtues and principles which to live. How do they aspire to something outside of themselves? And so as a parent of 3 boys, I know that this goal gets to the core of our aspirations for our children, meaning that statistically the concerns over whether our children will have a strong value system is one of the greatest fears of parents. and I feel that myself. During the critical period of adolescence, it's important for strong foundations of morality and virtue to be built. And so I think we would all agree that that's the hope for the young men who come through MBA, and that these virtues extend well beyond their time 7th through 12th grade at MBA, and is not something that they just have to conform to while they're here or while they're in your home, in your case. And so C.S. Lewis is quoted with the following reflections about the importance of mentoring youth and instilling virtues within them. He says, "You can hardly open a periodical without coming across the statement that what our civilization needs is more drive or dynamism or self-sacrifice or creativity. In a sort of ghastly simplicity, we remove the organ," and what he means by that is by minimizing the importance of morality and virtue and the way our emphasis with that, "and we demand the function. We make men without chests and expect of them virtue and enterprise." And so it still remains true that no justification of virtue will enable a man to be virtuous. I mean, you can't rationalize virtue. So without the aid of trained emotions, the intellect is powerless against the animal organism. Meaning that if you produce young men of performance, but create them, as he says, men without chests, or without trained principles by which to live, then you're not teaching them in the ways to be self-controlled against their impulses. And so they could be the most gifted person in whatever area that they may be gifted, and that's certainly the culture of excellence that we try to breed here. But if they don't have a trained emotions by which to control their impulses, then their potential will only go so far. And so they must be taught to aspire towards greater principles than themselves. C.S. Lewis, later on in this quote, quotes Aristotle, who says, "The aim of education is to make pupils like and dislike what they ought." So this idea that we've got to teach them how to navigate, and that's an important part of education. And so one of the best parts of working at a boys' school, and oftentimes a motive in parents sending their children to a place like MBA, is the opportunity to be able to help them in the process of finding principles greater than themselves that encourages them. Director's meeting. Sorry, I should close all that out. Hopefully there won't be any more meetings we have to go to. So anyway, finding principles greater than themselves and encouraging them towards the moral life, and again, this image of providing an anchor in the midst of the storm. And David Brooks is somebody who I love to read. If you haven't read his Road to Character, it's I think probably the best book I've read in a decade. And he's coming to MBA in November. Mr. Joya has worked his magic, and so we'll have the privilege of being able to hear from him firsthand. But he provided this insightful commentary about the development of moral principles when he spoke at the commencement at Dartmouth. So I'll read this. It says, "The moral world is not structured like the market world. It has an inverse logic. To develop morally and inside, you have to follow an inverse set of rules. You have to give to receive. You have to surrender to something outside yourself to gain strength within yourself. You have to conquer your desire to get what you crave. Success leads to the greatest failure, which is arrogance and pride. And failure can lead to the greatest success, which is humility and learning. In order to fulfill yourself, you have to forget yourself. In order to find yourself, you have to lose yourself." And so this idea, I really appreciate his words because it's so countercultural to see finding a higher purpose in investing outside yourself. You know, our culture so often tends to say that we need to look inside ourselves and find all these things. And my experience has been that you tend to be lost and confused when you do that. And so in thinking about this topic, the trend I see in young men is that the more that we define themselves by principles outside themselves, the more that we are helping them to provide them to navigate the storms of life, along with other influences such as religion or other positive moral influences. And so here's kind of a short list of what they get if they were to come at MBA. This is the most common topics in regards to something, virtues and character traits outside themselves, both moral and performance. And so this is from honor to respect, to leadership, to self-discipline, citizenship and service. This is what a lot of our community revolves around. And so it's the goal. For this goal, a good question to ask is, in what ways are we encouraging the boys towards these moral principles? And as we practically think about this topic, we have found that establishing milestones along the way is helpful to kind of symbolize the journey in a lot of ways. And so we try that in various ways. For those of you who've been around the MBA community, you know that there's a lot of ceremonies and things like that that symbolize various things. And I'm not going to spend much time going through this, but other than to say that this is important for them as both from our standpoint and from your standpoint. And that's something actually the letter writing ceremony that we do with Jim Welburn was an attempt to provide a venue for parents to naturally do it, because it can be, if you especially weren't, if that wasn't done to you growing up, which everybody's going to have a varying degree, then it can be a hard thing to kind of figure out on your own. And so Jim does a great job of just of kind of unveiling that in a very natural way. And that's something he's got a program at the end of September, and then a follow-up one with the boys, where he basically helps you to communicate your values to your son in a way that he can provide you a venue, or he encourages you to do one on your own. But at a minimum, it's just important to say that this is an important goal for us to do with the young men. And the last is ownership and instilling a sense of responsibility. That's a critical part of their development, although challenging. And MBA in your home could probably produce a long list of things that encourage responsibility. But a good question to ask in regards to this goal of ownership is, in what ways are we allowing them to fail? And in what ways are we mentoring them through their mistakes? And we'll talk a little bit about this under the best practices. So those are the goals. We're going to have time at the end if you have something that you think should be added to that list. Please hold that if you do. And we are going to now go to the development side. And as you well know, if you work with students 7 through 12, there's kind of this rapid change. There's Tom Peters, who was our valedictorian as a seventh grader. And here's Tom Peters during the last month before graduation. And so you can see the journey from 7th to 12th grade. And it's very obvious that there is a lot of physical maturity over a short amount of time. And these physical changes have a significant impact in regards to their development. And it's important for us to understand the ways in which these change and impact the young men at MBA. But the social and emotional changes make an even more significant impact, in my opinion, and drawing a lot from experience as a social worker and also as the director of counseling. Caroline Scholler is going to come up and talk about some of the social development. So I'll ask her to come up.
Good morning. Welcome to MBA. If this is your 7th grader, welcome back, 8th through 12th graders. We hope that you and your boys and the rest of your family have had a replenishing summer. We are eager to have them back on campus, as you can well imagine. It's been quiet without them, but at the same time, we've had some time to do some planning. I'm assisted with a wonderful group of counselors, some coaches, some teachers, and we are here first and foremost to support you in your endeavors as your son graduates from year to year. Some of you may know a lot of this. This is just a very basic, if you will, developmental 101, as well as perhaps some thoughts for us to think about in an age when development social development especially, not cognitive so much, but social, has many trends and is happening in a setting that most of us are unfamiliar with. And when I speak of that, I think you all know I'm talking about technology and social media, and I'll get to that in just a little bit. Our tasks when they are young is easy and very comfortable, is creating a nest for them. There is a Yiddish saying that when they're younger, you create a nest. When they're teenagers, you give them wings. How do we help them grow those wings? That probably is the largest challenge for us as parents of adolescents. The generation we're seeing now is the post-9/11 generation. There's been economic turmoil, international and national insecurity, terrorism and school shootings that are all too evident and able for them to see. All adolescents struggle with the pressures inherent in learning, growing, and that of school. Of the many contexts in which adolescents develop, none has received as much concerted attention as the parent-adolescent relationship. You know them best, and it's in that context that we ask that we partner with you and work in context with you, and the context that you use for identifying some of the high-risk categories as they develop. As parents, all of us struggle at times with feelings of helplessness, frustration, and anger over an adolescent school life. We all want them to learn well, study hard, and make good grades, have friends, and make their way to graduation. Yes, it's actually not that far off. They want the same. When their efforts and their results fall short of their expectations, or even threaten to fall short, parents and students alike struggle. Probably one of the hardest parts of parenting is when we see perhaps some of our own shortcomings that are holding back our sons as they develop. How do we recognize that within ourselves so that we are able to help them navigate those struggles? We all want to feel competent as parents, and that means that when things aren't going right, our initial impulse, very naturally, is that we jump in and want to fix it. We spend a lot of time and attention as quasi-quality control managers, watching for snags or flaws that we can fix in making our sons happier, smarter, and stronger. Despite our best efforts, and even with improvements, our adolescents will still struggle and suffer under the pressures of school and life. This is what we call growth and development. And as they say, development happens. There is a useful distinction that needs to be made here between being impatient with development sometimes and believing that development is something that we cannot engineer. Remember distinctly my oldest son, who's now 20 and 6'2", when he came on the first day of the 9th grade, somebody told him he was in the wrong place and wanted to take him to the 7th grade, which physically is probably where, and developmentally probably, well, physically where he belonged, not developmentally, only to find out that in his junior year, he grew 4 inches. It is very hard to step back here, and this is the place where I'm just so thrilled to see so many dads. But if we think of parenting during adolescence the same way we do when we're helping them to learn how to drive, how much do you put your foot on the gas? How much do you let off? When do you brake? When do you yield? If we use that analogy when we're parenting our sons, I think we can probably learn a lot. It's particularly difficult for the maternal-adolescent relationship. This is probably when we need to let off the gas a lot more than we want to. Dads, this is an incredible time to step up because, as we know, adolescent boys are looking for role models, and especially the mentoring and the role model or the father figure for them. Here we have wonderful faculty and coaches who are doing that to the best of their ability, but how do we enable that as a parent and especially as a mum? Sometimes if we're thinking of, there was an analogy once of development as a stage or a Broadway production. Then in the classroom we have front row seats to watch how that happens. On the sports field you'll have front row seats to see how it happens there. Whether it's an A+ or it's tests that they worked for and failed, or whether it's a pass that they missed or a pass that they caught. These are the times that we want to observe and encourage. So what can we do? We can create a good growing space at home. It's family life, the school in our efforts, the community in their efforts. This is where the nature and the nurture merge. Each student must find a way to manage the opportunities and the expectations of school and the deeper desires and demands of their own development. It is a huge job and an arduous one, often a painful one, and for the most part, teenagers do it alone and unappreciated. When we look at some of the lines here, or ladders as I'd like to call them, lines and ladders of development, for cognitive development, there's continued growth and development and the capacity for abstract thought. This is something that's new during adolescence. A greater capacity to set their own goals, their interest in moral reasoning. We have a wonderful debate team, and our history teachers and English teachers will demand a lot of our boys, especially when it comes to their theme writing. And we want to think about the meaning of life, which Will spoke to in depth, of developing their moral character. What about the social and emotional development? This is an intense time of self-involvement, a changing from high expectations and poor self-concept. The continued adjustment to the changing bodies, worries about whether they are normal. A tendency to distance themselves from parents, a continued drive for independence, and driven to make friends and a greater reliance on those friends. Popularity can be an important issue. And then, of course, for the older boys, there's the feelings of love and passion. Now, how do we do this in a world that has been hit by technology and social media? Some of that exceptionally helpful, some of it very difficult for us to navigate because we have no recall, because it didn't take place when we were growing up. So it really is transforming our society. It's hard for us to understand an adolescent's emotional life. Much of it is lived within the small confines of their screens. Teenagers report that they cannot actually differentiate between the life on the screen and their actual life and actual contact with people. As one of the teenage boys said very bluntly, we don't have a choice to live any life without iPads or iPhones. I think we like our phones more than we like actual people. All screen activity is linked to less happiness, and all non-screen activity is linked to more happiness. What's at stake now isn't how boys experience adolescence, and the constant pressure of cell phones will affect them well into adulthood. Adolescence is a key time for developing social skills. As teens spend more time with their friends face to face, they have fewer times to practice them. How do we best help them navigate this time? Teen minds have always craved stimulation, and their emotional reactions are by nature urgent and sometimes debilitating. And so I wanted to show you something that happened this summer, if you didn't catch it, of young students, we don't know if they were all men, who were accepted to Harvard University and decided within the confines of perhaps their bedroom or with each other to create a meme.
College admissions bombshell. Harvard University rescinding acceptance for 10 incoming students after they reportedly posted offensive messages on social media. ABC's Adrienne Bankert is outside the campus there in Cambridge, Massachusetts with the latest. Good morning, Adrienne.
Good morning to you, Amy. Yes, 10 of about 2,000 elite students who fulfilled their dreams of being admitted to Harvard are now being told their futures at the school are over before even starting.
Harvard is renowned for accepting only the best and brightest. But this morning, the dark side of an online student chat room started by some incoming freshmen has caused administrators to revoke their admissions. The university's own paper, the Harvard Crimson, reports that a group of 10 students accepted to the class of 2021 and meeting on the college's official Facebook page created an alternative page full of memes containing provocative and derogatory images and captions. The content too offensive to show, with R-rated memes poking fun at topics like the Holocaust, sexual assault, and targeting ethnic groups, one allegedly calling the fictional hanging of a Mexican child Piñata Time. The Crimson reporting that incoming students who wanted to join the R-rated chat had to first post something offensive in another group dedicated to mostly lighthearted memes. Wyatt Hurt is one of the school's newly admitted freshmen.
I haven't heard really any dissent on people saying this was the wrong thing to do. It's definitely reassuring that as Harvard, as a society, we still stand by the moral values that we were built on.
Harvard admissions even posting on the class of 2021's Facebook group description that they have the right to withdraw an offer of admission if an admitted student engages in behavior that brings into question his or her honesty, maturity, or moral character.
Okay, so just to appreciate that summary, and just to give you an understanding of this graph, you see there is an estimation of when students are going to encounter various seasons, meaning that the 7th and 8th grade we see are really important times where personal accountability, time management, there's not a lot of freedom. They are being molded in ways where a lot of structure is a good thing. And then the 8th, 9th, and 10th grade, they go into more identity type issues where both physically what they're going through, there's all sorts of questions, all sorts of angst. Socially, the friend groups change almost yearly and mostly multiple times a year. That's very normal. And in the midst of that, you have the social media issues where those things can be communicated in often not so good ways and are not often constructive towards the anchoring that you would hope for them. And so, developing functional relationships within that can be challenging. And then by about 10th grade year, they have the self-awareness capacity to kind of look more outside themselves and to begin to invest, and that's why the service is something that we really hone in for the sophomore year to make sure that because developmentally it's a lot more appropriate. And then by their junior year and senior year, there's a self-confidence that comes that's like a light switch in regards to their own physical maturity. And I was reflecting on that this week because I took the elected officers to Long Mountain to plan the year, and I was with the junior group, and they had all been with me at the 9th grade leadership retreat, and so comparing the differences of where they were at the low ropes course and different things like that to where they were in the 9th grade was really interesting for them and for me, because it was like this light switch had gone off, and they were just these different human beings. And so those are the trends. I also encourage you, the patch ceremony kind of captures that in some ways. Jackson Meredith did a great job of covering his own journey last year. If you want to look at that in the archives, that talks about the angst that he felt as a 9th grader, and then how he came into his own in different ways, and how that was misdirected and then kind of got aligned in good ways. And it's important for us to say that is such a normal process. And the impetus for a lot of this was based off of, I'd say, my most consistent parent meeting, which is a good thing. It's what we're here for, so I'm not saying it's bad, is the 9th grade year. It's without fail, the 11th and 12th, they're not many parent meetings there. And it's because parents see this angst, and they want to fix it, in different ways, or want us to help, and it really is part of the journey, part of the process. And also the empathy and humility that your son will gain by going through those things will shape him for his life. And I know that from personal experience, because I think the 2 years that I would least like to go to in life are the 9th and 10th grade years, and I was here at MBA, and the 11th and 12th grade were some of the best. It's just development, and I see it year in and year out. We both do. And so that's just, it's important to understand that journey, and also important for us to understand that we handle different things at different ages, and that they need different things at different ages. So best practices. This notion of as responsibility increases, so does freedom, is really important as we think about our young men going into independence. And so as a student's responsibility increases towards independence, when he'll need to be on his own, it's necessary that freedom be given to him, and that those two things go hand in hand so that he's ready to transition to college, meaning that you don't want to treat a senior the same way that you we're dealing with the 7th grader. Conversely, it's important that, that there be an agreement that if there is, and that you have kind of an understanding that if there's irresponsibility, that freedoms will be taken away, and that that's the way that life works, in the same way that you saw with the Harvard students with their mistakes and the way that Harvard responded to that, which totally cut off the relationship. And of course that's a different relationship, but and so communicating that up front, having them know that, and and having them understand that their freedom goes hand in hand with that is a good thing to do. And so taking this approach, both from the education standpoint, we do it. The seniors have a lot more freedom on campus than, and they often want a lot more. And anytime they come and say, Mr. Norton, this would be a great idea. Can we just make the whole campus a wall ball venue or something, or whatever it is that their idea is? The outlets that we will choose to have with that often go with responsibility. Well, are you being responsible in the dining hall, and which is their area of responsibility, or the student center and things like that, and so that there won't be any additional freedoms given unless we feel that they are appropriately responsible. And so I've listed some examples up here. We've collected some examples for you to reflect and incorporate with your daily life if you're not already doing it to a large extent. And this, if they are super responsible, if your son's just like the compliant, responsible type, they should be given a lot of freedom. They earn, it's part of the deal. I unfortunately have some redheads who I think are predisposed towards non-compliance in ways that hopefully they'll grow out by the time they get to high school, but very much a work in progress. And then I have a brown head who's like the most compliant, so that tends to be the trend in my house. But that's kind of the dance with that. In regards to accountability, although students need the opportunity to pursue freedom and to have freedoms that are appropriate for where they are developmentally, they also need the understanding of the accountability that comes when they make different choices, and that accountability is closely tied with that, and we play an important role of making sure that they are held accountable when they violate those their responsibilities. And this is closely tied with communication, which we'll get to at the end, of just being in close communication with everything, so that, and also being upfront with what are the consequences when certain things happen. And so in regards to allowing the freedom to fail and ownership, following along with appropriate freedoms as well as appropriate consequences is the understandings that they will inevitably fail. That the teenagers here, I don't know what it's going to be this year. I always, you never know what a year will bring, but that they, as in some ways, will break our hearts in different ways, in the ways that we think that they, it's part of the season that they're going through, and them pushing the envelope, and part of their own understanding of how to navigate that with their own peer pressures and things like that. And so in what ways are we allowing them the freedom to fail, and then mentoring them through those mistakes in ways that will help them to take those things off the list of options. Good example is the Big Brother. We have the Big Brother breakfast on Friday, and inevitably out of 130 seniors, we charge them at the beginning of the year, make it very clear, our show up fronts and multiple emails, call your little brother. Inevitably, there will be a percentage of people who will either wait to the last minute or, and that's, and so, and of course, and then this coming in as a seventh grader, if you're on the receiving end of that, you think, oh, this is, we don't have a good big buddy, and this isn't going to work out. And I will say that, oftentimes those who don't have good buddies in the seventh grade will become the better big buddies so it kind of comes full circle in different ways. And so whether you're on the receiving end of that or whether you're on the mentoring end of a senior, you should expect that there's a degree of failure. Have them take ownership, mentor them, and make the most of those situations. And within that failure, there's the opportunity for humility. And the hope is that with our support, they will navigate that process, and that humility is within humility, there's an opportunity for them to be transparent about their shortcomings, and also connect with us in different ways, meaning the people at school, you all at home, and stay closely connected, which is, in the end, one of the most important things. And so Caroline's going to come up and talk about communication before we close.
We've all read and know the studies of trying to give our sons the emotional vocabulary they need to express their emotions. We're not asking them to be a teenage girl, but we are asking them to please be in touch with how it is they're feeling or how they are experiencing life. They're spending more time under the same roof as we are, but you can hardly say that we're closer to them. There has, as we know, been a decrease in communication. Restricting technology might be difficult and definitely unrealistic to impose, but more seems to be at stake when urging teenagers to use their phones responsibly, and there is benefit in teaching them how to use it in moderation. Teens have told us, especially teenage boys, that when they try and express something that is difficult for them or dear to them, that their friends, in essence, are not listening to them because they're constantly on their screens. This is when they're realizing that perhaps a technology communication is far less impactful and meaningful than if it were in person. So how do we do this? One-on-one communication. Mums, this is a perfect time for you to model empathy, to give them the vocabulary. The most asked question in the US, and probably the least desired, especially for 7th to 12th grade boys, is how was school today? Not worth it, because they will say to you, they will think to yourself, it was life. I was having to endure my peers. I was having to deal with the demands from teachers. I was trying to find out if this friend is really a friend to me, or if he's moving to a different friend circle. Are the choices that he's making the choices that I want to be making? Is this somebody I want to be with or not be with? And as Will had expressed, we see a lot of shuffling, if you will. For those of you who like rugby, you see a lot of the scrum phenomena where it's, as they develop and they develop into their own young men, they might be very different in the 9th grade or the 10th grade than they were in the 7th grade. Allow them and give them the opportunity and the width to find the friends that they want to at different times. Talk about the real stuff. Go beyond achievements, go beyond schedules, go beyond chores. Become attuned to their emotional world. You're the ones that know them best, and you know their personalities best. Most teens do not share the kind of information about schools that their parents want to hear. Every teen's school experience is intricate, exciting, sometimes painful, and often just a boring psychological journey. So what can we do? More than anything, we can be there and pay attention, but don't smother. Give them space to grow, give them space to separate from us. Yet, very importantly, watch for any change in mood, any change in behavior. Make sure you don't let go of your expectations for behavior and respect within the home, but at the same time, allow them to express their interests and allow them sometimes to have a downtime and for a mood to be a little more grumpy than you would want to tolerate or want to endure. Show interest in their internal life without any judgment. Before you may think they look just like you from those pictures that you took and that are up on the walls or in your bedrooms, but they're turning in to be their own people, their own young men and their own adults. And how do we do this without judgment? Resist getting angry when you find out they've been hiding something. Rather, express concern. Make sure you always include family members, siblings, if you will, and extended family as often as possible. A family that grows together stays together. How do you stay attuned? How do we learn to not be tone deaf? Boys have a very small vocabulary when it comes to their emotions and life experiences. Expand that for them. Say to them, seems to me like you're feeling a little bit despondent now. They know what that word means. They may not express it to you. Be real with a word like sad. Be real with a word like you look excited, you look happy. Rather than saying to them, how are you? Give them an opening and ask a pretty, what we could call a closed-ended question rather than an open-ended question. They don't have the know-how, are not developmentally ready to engage in some of those open-ended questions and conversations that we might have with each other. Please know that we here at MBA Student Affairs, your son's advisors, your son's teachers, coaches, and especially those of us in the counseling department are here to help you in this journey. It is a privilege for us to work with you, but most of all with your sons. So if you see any changes that concern you, if you know of any high-risk categories that are affecting your son or even his friends, please know that we work under the cloth of confidentiality when it comes to concerns. Obviously, if there is any concern about harm to self or harm to others, then we will take it to the next step. But Will's going to close in our desire and our heart to partner with you as we watch them grow in yet another year and hopefully another 6 years together. So thank you very much.
And the last point that I would make before I open up for any questions or feedback is that they're watching us closely, and as we talked about with the faculty last week, the sense, the adage of that behavior is caught, not taught, is very significant, I think, for teenagers, meaning that they're watching all of us, and the more that we talk about and are transparent with the goals and the way that those play out in our own lives, the more that provides meaning for them, and the more that I think it makes a deeper impression, rather than saying one thing, maybe living a different way. That discrepancy is they're already cynical, so they can that feeds into their psyche already, and so that's an important thing that we focus on here, and important thing for all of us to think about. So I know we're approaching 8:30, which is when we wanted to conclude. Does anybody from either the goals or developmental trends across the board, is there any comments, additions, or questions that anybody have? Yes. Yeah. That's probably just a, well, there's a, yeah, it probably should. I think that, I can't remember why the chores, job, that's because they have a job. That's why it was part of that. So rather, they have a little bit more, they can drive, and that should be an important part of their own financial journey and independence. Good question. Any other thoughts or comments? Or yes. It is not publicly. I'm happy to email it, and we'll. I tell you what I'll do is I'll post it. We're going to have the video for those who weren't able to attend, and with that on the link at the next push page, I will have this embedded within that, and so you can download it from that. Yeah, and digest it more. Yes. Let me check. We've got it. I'm not sure that we put that up on the archives, but I can include that as well. Happy to. He's got a really great message and is very transparent. If you haven't read his book, Wherever I May Wind Up, it's about his journey where he is just really raw in regards to his own reflections of development and where he seeks to be, which is impactful. A lot of people go to his talks because he's the Cy Young Award winner, and then they find out that he's talking about his inner life in ways they're like, wow, that's not what I expected. So, any other thoughts or questions? Well, we're delighted to be on this journey with you and your son. We have tons of leftover refreshments if you would like. Thanks for being here this morning. We look forward to a great year with your son. Thanks.